Number 9. Metra train cars in California. For years, a collection of aging bi-level rail cars that were once used as passenger trains could be seen sitting along the Carrizo Gorge Railway, which straddles the border between California and Mexico. They're completely covered in graffiti and rust, and have reportedly been at their current site near Dubber Spur in California since 2007 or earlier. While it's unclear what the cars were used for, it's been speculated that they were purchased from Metra for use as a passenger line along the railway that now functions as their final resting place. And for years they sat parked on the spur alongside the main rail. In 2015, several of the Metra cars derailed in what's been described as a suspicious incident. They were also stripped of their brakes, shocks, and other parts, leading many to suspect that the cars had been sabotaged. In an email obtained by the San Diego Reader, Carrizo Gorge Police Chief Mark Langley told executives at Pacific Imperial Railroad that they needed to get the damaged cars off the track immediately. He then explained that they could potentially damage the railroad, which is used regularly by commuter trains. Langley went on to describe the situation as a major public safety issue, stating that people could be harmed or killed if proper action wasn't taken. One rail enthusiast speculated in a social media post that the suspected saboteur appeared to have tampered with the rail switch, causing the cars to roll backward onto the main track, at which point they derailed. Some even suspected that the person who caused the derailment did so in an attempt to block the main line. The railroad has allegedly been shrouded in allegations of fraud and cover-ups for years, leading some to feel as though the situation could be better understood if there was less secrecy surrounding the railroad, period. Of course, most of the suspicions surrounding the alleged corruption and shady dealings point toward money as a motivating factor. According to one social media user, news of the incident only caused further problems by drawing more unruly and disrespectful visitors to the site. Eventually, though, the cars were removed from the property due to the ongoing issues. Several were scrapped while others were transported to more secure locations. Then in 2018, the damaged section of railroad was rebuilt, but the identity of the person responsible for the damages and their reasons for doing so remain a mystery to this day. Number 8. Scottish Ghost Town. In East Ayrshire, Scotland, there's a collection of 16 dilapidated homes that were once worth hundreds of thousands of dollars each. Only 3 of them are occupied, while the rest have been left to decay at the hands of Mother Nature. Construction on the neighborhood, known as the Wool Mill Place, began in 2007, but the project stopped suddenly and the partially built houses were abandoned. Walls were left half-painted and plastered, along with toilets and baths that were never fitted into place. A company bought the development shortly after it was deserted, but the handful of residents who moved into the few completed homes claimed that nothing has been done to work towards finishing the rest of the houses. Residents are understandably outraged now that they're stuck living in a rotting ghost town after being promised a nice community. One homeowner told the Daily Record that if the current owner isn't going to do anything with the property, the least they could do is sell it to someone who will. It's a fair request, but as of August 2023, there appear to be no imminent plans to finish and sell the houses. Number 7. Rochester Subway. Home to roughly 210,000 residents, Rochester is New York State's third largest major city. During the 1920s, a 7-mile light rail line was built in the bed of the old Erie Canal to alleviate the heavy street-level traffic that came with the city's growing population. And 2 miles of the transit line ran below the streets like a traditional subway. The system operated from 1927 until 1956. It was shut down due to overwhelming operating costs and low ridership, as commuters traded in their train passes for car ownership. Over the years, many of the tunnels were filled in, but some of the passageways remain, including a stretch of tunnel that runs beneath Broad Street. It's against the law for civilians to explore the abandoned space, but curious visitors find their way inside from time to time. The tunnel walls are covered with over 100 colorful murals, courtesy of local graffiti artist Justin Suarez. People are drawn to the old subway not out of a desire to cause trouble, but because they appreciate its history and its lasting impact on the local culture. At the same time, its neglected state reflects the hard times that fell on Rochester during and after the end of America's industrial era, which the city remains affected by to this day. Number 6. Foreshore Freeway Bridge. In Cape Town, South Africa, there's a span of elevated highway that simply stops in midair, and it's been that way for more than 45 years. Known as the Foreshore Freeway Bridge, and perhaps better known by its nickname, the Unfinished Bridge, the structure was intended to be part of a new highway that was designed to relieve traffic congestion. Construction began in the early 1970s and came to an abrupt halt in 1977. The project was abandoned due to budget issues, and the partially built overpass has languished in plain sight ever since. To this day, the city council remains undecided on what to do with it. In the meantime, it's become a popular tourist destination and a movie set. In 2012, there was a contest challenging local college students to come up with an affordable plan for the unfinished bridge. 600 people entered, and officials were still unable to settle on a decision. More recently, in 2018, plans were put forth to complete the bridge, but the project fell apart before construction could even begin due to contractor-related issues. For now, the unfinished bridge continues to languish with an uncertain future as it functions as little more than Cape Town's proverbial elephant in the room. Number 5. Project Reese. Between 1943 and 1945, the Nazis built 7 large underground tunnels in the Owl Mountains, which are located in modern-day Poland. The project was never finished, though, and its purpose remains a mystery to this day due to lack of surviving documentation. Like many of Nazi Germany's construction projects, the tunnels were built by forced laborers, many of whom died due to disease, malnutrition, and violence at the hands of their captors. Researchers have estimated that anywhere from 8,000 to 13,000 concentration camp prisoners were forced to work on the project. Construction was still in its early stages when the tunnels were abandoned in various stages of completion, and altogether roughly 5.6 miles of tunnels were created, but it's believed that the network was planned to be much larger. Some have speculated that the complex was intended as one of Adolf Hitler's headquarters, with nearby Schage Castle serving as his dedicated living quarters. It was almost most likely meant to function as a series of underground factories, where the Nazis hoped to carry out a large-scale production of war material without being seen by the Allies. Today, some of the tunnels are open to visitors, who often find that the sites feel eerily frozen in time, seemingly untouched since their desertion nearly 80 years ago. If you were in charge of a secret operation, what code name would you give it? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, subscribe to the channel. Number 4. State Guest Mansions. In the hills surrounding the city of Shenyang in northeastern China, there's a ghost town filled with 260 partially built mansions that have sat abandoned for over a decade. Construction on the development, known as the State Guest Mansions, began in 2010 and abruptly stopped 2 years later. While it's unclear exactly why the developer threw in the towel, some locals blame government corruption. A farmer who lives nearby told the media outlet AFP that authorities cracked down on uncontrolled housing developments and easy access to loans, resulting in a funding cutoff that forced the project to stall. Abandoned neighborhoods that were never finished being built are such a common sight in China that there's even a name for them: rotten tail homes. These deserted developments have been appearing for years throughout the country, and yet new neighborhoods and even entire cities are being built at lightning speed. Even in cases where construction is completed, getting people to relocate has often proven to be a challenge. Newly built settlements that were meant to be thriving urban centers are often mere ghost towns. In the more than 10 years since the plug was pulled on the state guest mansions, nearby farmers and their livestock have reclaimed the land for their own use. Cows roam freely in spaces that were once meant for freshly paved streets, and fences have been built in the yards of homes that were originally intended for millionaires. Some of the more completed houses are filled with lavish fixtures, including chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling pillars, and enormous picture windows. Front entrances are also marked by empty water fountains and overgrowth. It's unclear whether there are plans to finish or demolish the post-apocalyptic neighborhood, or if it's destined to meet the same fate as many other ghost towns throughout China and slowly succumb to the elements. Number 3. Block 37 Superstation. During the early 2000s, Chicago officials brainstormed for ways to alleviate the hopelessly congested traffic on the roads leading to and from O'Hare Airport. One potential solution was to build dedicated train lines for shuttling travelers between the airport and the heart of the city. So in 2006, construction began on a so-called Superstation beneath the famous Block 37 in Chicago's Loop District. Located beneath a shopping center, the enormous underground space came at a cost of $200 million to taxpayers. According to estimates, funding an entire train line would cost anywhere from $771 million to $1.5 billion. Not surprisingly, the project failed to gain enough traction to go anywhere. The so-called Superstation is nothing more than a giant concrete basement that serves no practical use. Those who managed to gain a first-hand look at the space can instantly tell that it was built with big plans in mind. But it's closed to the public and nothing more than a dark void that will likely never be used. In fact, only a handful of people have ever seen the Superstation that never was. Included among the lucky few was a local Cranes journalist, Greg Hines, who described the unfinished station as absolutely wacko and a concrete shell. More specifically, he called the site an endless dark space with big, high pillars. Hines summed up his thoughts on the abandoned project in a less than flattering term, stating, "Somebody in power wanted it, so they did it." Number 2. Spain's unfinished housing developments. If you're old enough to remember the 2008 recession, you'll likely recall hard times falling upon the entire globe. But some countries were affected worse than others, and Spain was one of the hardest-hit nations during the crisis. During the 1990s and early 2000s, Spain experienced rapid economic growth, which was accompanied by a major housing boom. More homes were built in the country than France, Germany, and the UK combined, and Spain boasted a higher home ownership rate than any other country in the European Union. Houses were still being built when the market went bust practically overnight. Construction ground to a screeching halt, and an estimated 3.4 million homes were left empty. And among those homes, around 500,000 of them were only partially built. For years, unemployment plagued the country, to the point where many young people gave up hope of finding jobs, while others left for better prospects elsewhere. In the meantime, the unfinished housing simply sat with no solid plans in place for its future. Over a 10-year period, photographer Marco Redondo photographed these eerily deserted sites for his Sandcastles project. The images showed neatly lined rows of houses with gaping holes where windows and doors were never installed, and crumbling brick walls. There were also pictures of cement staircases, empty swimming pools, and cul-de-sacs where one would normally expect to see children playing, completely devoid of any sign of human life. In recent years, the Spanish government has taken action to turn some of the country's vacant homes into affordable housing. But many of the unfinished developments remain just as they were left more than 15 years ago. They're now in worse condition, though, as they slowly start to crumble from the effects of time and nature. Number 1. North Carolina's Road to Nowhere. During World War II, the U.S. federal government flooded thousands of acres of land in North Carolina's Smoky Mountains to create Fontana Dam. The structure was built in an effort to meet the increasing energy demands of the war effort, and it remains in use today. Unfortunately, though, an entire town called Judson was located on the floodplain, leaving its residents with no choice but to move before the reservoir began to fill. In addition to leaving the homes that had belonged to some families for generations, the people of Judson left behind cemeteries where their loved ones were buried and other beloved fixtures of their town. The government vowed to make sure that these families would have continued access to their ancestral lands by promising to build a 30-mile road to the area. But by the time the 1970s rolled around, less than 7 miles of the road had been built. Construction never resumed, and the road ends abruptly in a tunnel in the side of a mountain. Infamously dubbed the Road to Nowhere, the unfinished pass serves as a sore reminder of the sacrifices their ancestors made based on the government's false promises. In 2018, the county agreed to drop its demands for the road to be finished in exchange for a $52 million payout. Are there any other abandoned projects you want us to cover in a future video? Let us know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.